next up, getting over to webforms.ca. So as far as accessing webforms, I just want you to be aware that you do have a couple of ways of getting there as well. Okay, you can either go directly by typing in webforms.ca. This takes you to the main CREA page where you can log in using your credentials. I'll show you the second way in a few steps, in a few moments there, but if you do go to webforms.ca, right, you can click on the sign in option. From here, it will put you through the realtor link where you enter your credentials. So in my case here, I'm going to be selecting Oakville Milton as an OMDREB member, sign into board, and then you will see the kind of Clarity ITSO login that you might be used to seeing when you go over to the matrix side. When you log in with your OMID and password, since I went directly to webforms.ca, it is going to push me through. Once it kind of check marks and makes sure my browser's up to date and all that kind of stuff, I will land right on the dashboard for WebForms. Okay. The reason why I mention that is because I know that there's a lot of members that might be dual members or members of other boards. I want to show you the most direct way, just because I know in a lot of situations, right, you may have your own way of getting over to WebForms, whether it's going through a specific board website and trying to get to like a section where you have access to your account and your profiles and all that kind of stuff. But I always really want to show that more basic way of getting to WebForms by just going to webforms.ca. So you know the option is always there, right? Just to be prepared, right? Not that like, let's say that everything kind of was going awry and you weren't able to log into ITSO Real Estate, but you still wanted to go to WebForms. Well, you can. You don't specifically have to go to that first section. You can always just bypass that and go direct. And what I'll do is I'm just going to open up a new window here where I could show you that other path. So if I was to go to itsorealestate.ca, okay, difference being that if I wanted to go to WebForms, I would be accessing it from the tools section. So we make our way through this application dashboard. I would be selecting ITSO Matrix. And when I'm looking for the WebForms link, it is just below the tools section. So you see the account you're logged into, this being the matrix system, hover tools, click on WebForms, and I would stumble on the same place. It takes those credentials from Realtor Link and takes us to the very same place. So whether you prefer taking that route or perhaps you like just typing in WebForms, just want to make sure that you're that you have all of those kind of tools in, let's say, in your toolbox so that you can get to WebForms in different ways if required. Okay, so this would just end up loading and I'd be on the dashboard, of course, but here I'll just kind of close these out and we're already here. It has loaded for us now that we're kind of in this session here. So let me just see if it kept the session. Perfect. All right, so now to talk about the agenda. As far as today's session, there's going to be two main topics that we're going to discuss. Okay, the first major topic being that of using AuthentiSign. I like to tackle that one first. I know that AuthentiSign, being that it's more of like a newer application, we're seeing the AuthentiSign pen here on the left. I'll be sure to cover everything that has to do with that. And in starting an AuthentiSign kind of e-signing that we're going to do together, we will actually look at it from our client's perspective. So we'll start the transaction, we'll add a document. I'm actually on my dashboard here. I know it's a very, very simplified document in general here, but I had to choose something that wasn't going to be legally binding that I played around with. So I really just went in and made this document, right? And as you could tell, it's a PDF file, right? So this is not, it's not specifically like an agreement of purchase and sale or anything, but I did want to make that point that you really can sign anything you'd like, right? Even though our access to AuthentiSign is within WebForms, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be, you know, an ARIA form 123. Like, you can really use any document that you'd like and you can use it to sign. Okay, so it doesn't have to specifically be part of a real estate transaction. You you can use this even for other things in your day-to-day. You have access to the license. And I will be sure to talk even more about kind of how that license came about. So that's our kind of silly little document we will sign just for the purposes of training. Once we've seen it from the client's perspective and we've really covered everything and all the bases on the AuthentiSign portion, that will sum up the first half, and then we'll transition into more of the walkthrough of web forms in general. So with today's session, it is meant to be a lot more of the kind of introductory steps of web forms, getting really comfortable with the different features. We're going to go through the options on this left-hand menu. I'll highlight some of the bells and whistles that are here, and we will conclude on actually adding our own transaction, attaching an agreement of purchase and sale to it, and then just concluding with talking a little bit about the formatting. So first half, everything AuthentiSign related. Second half is going to be that introductory web forms walkthrough. Okay, perfect. Maybe some things to note here just from the start. As far as web forms in general, even when we're using AuthentiSign, the utilities are going to carry through and be pretty similar. Something you might notice me doing pretty often is clicking on these 3 red lines. So if you are maybe a little bit newer using web forms, just note that this kind of allows the menu to pop open and gives you a description of what's actually hidden there in the menu. The items that we're going to start by tackling here are this AuthentiSign pen, as well as the App Store. And what I want to do is just start with just really, really quick description of how AuthentiSign came about and became a part of our web forms offering here. And what happened is, as you know, this Kriya Web Forms, this new platform that we're using for real estate transactions, is run by kind of a larger umbrella company called Lone Wolf Technologies. They acquire kind of different real estate companies that are in the space, and one of them was this utility, this transaction desk that Kriya chose to go with for the web forms program that we use. Something that happened really recently, I almost want to say we're going on about a year. I want to say it happened around March last year. Well, web forms and Kriya, well, they made an agreement with AuthentiSign because Lone Wolf Technologies actually acquired the company that owns AuthentiSign. So Lone Wolf kind of absorbed Instanet Solutions, which is putting on AuthentiSign, and early last March, there was an agreement that Kriya made with this new agreement, and we now have access to it. What happens is every Kriya member in Ontario has an AuthentiSign license within web forms. So being that everyone in this session, as far as I'm just kind of assuming here, is an OMDREB member, when you're a member of the board, you are a participating member of Kriya. You pay Kriya dues, you're a Kriya member, and as a result, you have the AuthentiSign pen and you can transact. Okay, so that is your portal and your access to use this for any transaction that you'd like. What goes kind of further to that, and it brings in the App Store here, is if you have any other signing options, perhaps other ones that you prefer using or you'd like to add in as well, this is the spot where you would attach those or link them to your web forms. Okay, so when we go to the App Store, you'll notice my AuthentiSign is showing up included. I don't have to link it or anything like that. However, if perhaps my brokerage is providing me as part of that membership, that they're providing me with a DocuSign license or a Next One license perhaps, well, I would come to this section, I would click on the link option, and then I would follow through by just typing in my login credentials. And from then on, when I go to transact, I can choose either AuthentiSign or one of the third-party ones. Okay, and I know just because this question does come up pretty often, just to tackle that one, I'm not the best person to make a comparison to a different one for you. Apologies. I only have a background with what I've learned in AuthentiSign recently. As far as if you are curious and you'd like to try out one of these other applications, please do just click on the link and follow the steps. I believe that a lot of them do offer like a 30-day trial. So you might be able to just click on the link button, have a look at what they're offering. Maybe there is a 30-day trial and you just try it out and see if it meets kind of what you're looking for, how you manage your transactions and how you manage your business. Okay, but if you ever want a third-party one, or you're a little curious about seeing the other options out there, App Store is the place to start for that. We will be focusing on AuthentiSign, however. I'll click on the pen now and make our way there because this is the one that is included. So let's go through the steps, and we're going to look at each of the different kind of selections that you make as you're setting up a signature for your client. Okay, so as far as just even looking at the screen right now and WEBForms in general, we're going to see some things that carry through to the other screens, right? Even though we're working on the AuthentiSign portion, right? Knowing that it's integrated and it's built in, well, they made the whole look of it feel and kind of flow through and look a lot like WEBForms. A button that is going to come up pretty often, even when we go to create a transaction or we create something new, is this kind of add button. Usually on WEBForms, it's a create button, it's a plus button when you're setting up something new. So we're going to go ahead and just click on that now. And it'll kind of start the process as we set up this e-signature. So I'll hit add. The pop-up that comes up when you create something as well will always have an indication of the mandatory fields that you have to fill out. So in this case, it's pretty simple. It's just telling me that I have to, at the very least, I have to name this transaction before I can proceed. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to choose a pretty general vague topic here, but let's go signing any document using AuthentiSign, or signing any document training. How about that? Okay. If you were tying this to a transaction that you have open on WEBForms, right, it would allow you to do it at this point. It is optional, so I'm going to leave it blank. And then this last check mark, all it's referring to is, well, are you just naming this and you want to keep it for later, just so you have it, or do you want to actually just, as you hit save, do you want it to pop up and so that you start going through the actual steps to completion? In our case, we do want to get right over to that, so I'll leave it checked off and hit the save option. Just let it load. Okay, perfect. Now we can see as it kind of completes loading here, I'll be able to see that I am in fact still kind of in the space where I can always go back to my dashboard. I can choose those other WEBForms options. However, in working here, I am faced with kind of the 4 steps, and I'll just minimize this one. There we go. Maybe that's a bit easier to see. The 4 steps that entail actually creating a signing using this AuthentiSign tool. So what we're going to be working through is we're going to do step 1, details. We're going to follow it up with participants, the documents that we want to sign, and then we're going to design it by selecting the spaces where those signatures are actually going to happen. Okay, so those are kind of our 4 main simple steps that we're going to follow. And as soon as we're finished designing, we'll just wait for that email to come in and we'll have a look at what your client sees as well to kind of cover all the bases there. Let me just have a quick read here. I saw a question come through. I see. I completely made a mistake here. So it looks like I just got a message about that. Apologies. It looks like I'm singing this document. That is my fault. There we go. We are now signing the document. Yep, so you can actually make a change to that title. It carries through. If I made a change and edited it at this point, it'll kind of fix once I hit the save option. I know it's still incorrect at the top there, but we made the quick update. Now we're actually going to be signing a document. I know for sure you don't want to hear me singing during this session. I will save you from that, but yeah, really appreciate that you kind of pointed that out. As far as our step 1, okay, so really simple, the things that you have to do during these 4 steps. To explain this first part, you really do just have to make one kind of decision based on the participant order, okay? In this first step of details, it's really just that title and what kind of structure, if there is any, right, for who has to sign this document first, who has to sign the document second. Okay, so that's just these 2 options that you can kind of switch in between. So first come, first serve. kind of self-explanatory there, but how this one works is if you do the simul sign and you choose first come, first serve, then you're leaving it completely open. You're saying that, well, the invitations are going to be sent out. Whoever goes in and completes the signing first, that would be kind of the first one that gets to completion, but there's no set order. It's not like it's more of an open feel to the document. The complete opposite side of the coin here, and the one that we're going to follow for today's example, is signing in line or signing participates sign in order. Wow, it's hard to say all of that many signs. Okay. What this one is trying to say is, yes, in this case, we have a specific order, right? Is it perhaps that an employee signs the document first, that a manager will then sign their copy once that first participant is complete, and then perhaps even on top of that, is it the CEO that has to review the document, maybe not sign, but just review the document and confirm that everything is in good order, and then they do that third, right? So signing in order would be that description, that it's like the different participants that we are going to choose later on, do they have to do it in a set order, or is it simul sign and is it just completely open and whoever gets to it first gets to it first? Okay, so that's your main decision in these two, and we are going with a little bit of a more structured one here for our example. As soon as we've made that selection, just like that, we are over to our option number 2, which is choosing these participants that are going to take place in the signing. So I'll open this one up. Okay, we get a little pop-up on screen. It's telling us, all right, do we want to add a new participant? Okay, perhaps we're adding them in this case from scratch. It's just going to be blank and we'll fill in the details. Is it perhaps a participant that I have saved in my contacts? That on WEBForms I've got, my lawyer information and I'm planning on using that contact. Well, maybe I'll just click on that and go and select their details that I've already pre-completed, let's say. Or do we want to add ourselves? We have our own kind of realtor profile that comes through and shares through to WEBForms, and if you're adding yourself on the transaction, perhaps you're just making this third option. In our case, we're going to add them all kind of from option 1. Just we'll have it blank so you could see what the mandatory fields are. So I'll just select this add new participant, and we can tell right away that we have 3 things that are mandatory: the type, the name, and also the email address, being that this is an e-signature and kind of an online signing. Well, how they receive the invitation and how it gets completed is all through email. So we absolutely need that. Starting with our very first one here, I mean, we could see we're adding a new participant. We have some options towards the top. We'll talk about a little bit more when we go to add this one. Our type, okay, we have remote signer, in-person signer, reviewer, and CC only. So from left to right, it basically is kind of talking about how, let's say, like how much responsibility does this individual have in completing this transaction. Okay, the first 2 options, pretty straightforward. That's like when someone actually, the participant is specifically signing the document, either remotely via email or in person by completing it in this sense. Both of these would refer to an individual that is in fact signing the document. Okay, reviewer, right, a little bit lower on the amount of responsibility. They're not in fact going to like physically sign the document, whether it's online or in person. They are just going to have to glance at what's been completed in order to approve it. Okay, so that's your next one, right? Maybe it's just a manager that's reviewing, or a different kind of individual that just needs it for review, perhaps even a lawyer that just needs it for review. Okay, and then CC only, right? The copies of the documents, do I want them to go to a specific place? Should it be going to the administrator at the front desk for the brokerage? Not that they need to participate in the signing, but should they receive a copy? Okay, that's all CC is saying. So we have differing levels of how much responsibility takes place on the signing, of course, from kind of left to right here. And we are going to use a remote signer. We're going to pretend in this example that we are the participant. So let's go ahead and kind of choose maybe a little bit of a fake name here. I am going to use my own email, so I'm not going to put my name. or else it does get extremely confusing when I start referring to this participant. Let's go with J. Jeez, I'm always the worst at this. J. I'm going for 2 first names almost here. J Mark. Yeah, we're going with J Mark. JM is our current participant. And they're a remote signer. Again, I'm going to put in my email here. And this is always something that you can complete on your own as well. I would highly suggest, even after following through this session, really, really good to test this on just by yourself, whether it's choosing your own document and trying it out, or if you and one of your colleagues kind of put something together and just on there somewhere state that it's not a legally binding document, of course, but really just for some practice. So I'm using kind of just a test name for the training today, but I do need it to go through to my email so that we can actually see it. So I will put eric@omdreb.ca. Our options at the top here. If you're adding multiple participants, then the quickest way is going to be clicking add another. That's going to give me a new blank form. In the background, we'll see that this participant 1's been kind of added. I just want to hit add though so that you can see what is going to happen. If I choose this option, it will exit the window and we're saying like, hey, we're done adding participants. Notice how it's done that. And we just have JMark over here. Okay. I'm going to have to add another participant so that we can have that second one for the document that I showed you earlier. So I'll go back in, click add participant again. Of course, if I clicked add another, we would have stayed in the screen. We could have kept doing this second one. There'll also be a remote signer. Let's go with I don't know, Julie. I think I went with J Mark. I gotta stay away from Julie because the J Mark, and I guess this one will be a SS. So we have JM for the initials and SS for the initials. I'm trying to trying not to make them too comparable so that they don't become confusing when we go to design. So and then for this one, what I'm going to do is just to work in a little bit of showing you what happens if you choose a destination that does not exist. I'll actually purposefully make a mistake in my email. So I've got Eric, I put a whole string of numbers. This email does not exist, but I'm still going to choose that as my destination, and we'll talk about that. It'll make more sense later when we get over to seeing the completed transaction. So this is all I'm going to do for this one as well. Samantha Smith is our second participant. We added in that email, and I'll just hit the add button here. Perfect. So now that we have the individuals, the participants that are going to be a part of this transaction, notice that there is a little bit of these gray lines on the side. When you hover over top, you get your 4-pointed arrow, which means that you can actually drag and drop, and you can change the order if you'd like. So after making that selection, once I let it update, you would see that, well, Samantha Smith is now participant 1, right? You can always kind of change around that order in your transaction, right? We're going with a really simplified version here. In your transaction, you might end up having 8 individuals that are part of this, right? Maybe there's two people on the buyer side. They have, even their representation. On top of that, there's the lawyers, right? We can very quickly get to like 8 individuals that are participating in the transaction. And if you want to kind of switch up the order, AuthentiSign makes that pretty easy here with that kind of drag and drop feature. But perfect. Now that we've added these on, just go ahead and I'm just going to minimize that and then open up step 3, which is, hey, which document are we in fact going to be signing in this case? You get a pop-up that gives you multiple options for how you are going to bring in that file. Okay, so we can either select it from some options that have to do with web forms. These top 2 are referring to web forms. Do I want to select it from the forms section, right? Am I going to go to the ARIA folder and choose an agreement of purchase and sale? Well, that's kind of the first option here. Am I selecting it from specifically the transactions that I've already started, right? Is it one that I created a bit of a transaction for and I'm going to go and get it, right? That's all this top 2 options are all web forms related. it gets followed up by cloud storage, right? Do I have this particular file that I want to sign? Is it in my OneDrive? Is it in my Google Dropbox or Google Drive, that kind of thing? The one that we are going to use, of course, is upload a file. You saw that kind of it is on my my desktop, so I'm gonna just go ahead and kind of probably drag it in, or we'll see the options as soon as I make the selection, but you have quite a few different ways here. So let's go ahead and just choose upload a file. Okay, it's already kind of ready to go. It looks like it had it already preset to my desktop, it looks like, and I have test signing for AuthentiSign training. This was the document that we wanted to bring in. So if I just make the selection there, right, it was just this one here that we talked about earlier. I could always open it up and have a look. Well, and there it is. So it is now attached. And notice the exact same thing, just like when we were in the participant screen, when it comes to your documents and forms that you have in here, you can always change the order. Okay, the one at the top being the first one your participant's going to see, and each of them are going to follow as you go into this design phase, right? If there was 8 documents here, when I go to design, all 8 of them would be in that section, and I would just start putting in those signature spots one at a time until I got to that bottom one, which would be my 8th one. Okay, we're just doing the one document. It's a simple one-pager in our case. We'll minimize this, and we can just open up step 4 and start designing it. There we go. All right, so as soon as we click on design, it puts us in a little bit of a space where we're kind of editing and kind of making some necessary changes here. Some things to note, right? We can go back to that previous screen that we were in that was showing us all of the steps. If we click next, we're pretty much going into more of a step saying that, hey, maybe we're done here and we're moving towards completion. Could also see the signers at the top right. So you can always switch in between your participants, right? If I wanted to set up whether I'm working on Jay's portion or on Samantha's, I can always just choose one or the other. Okay, we can see a preview of our document on the left as we scroll down. You can see the full document here. Of course, ours is quite simple, right? We kind of set up that we're going to have a signature that is going to be time-stamped or dated. Both participants are going to do the same, and then I did put a small little box for a bit of the initials as well, which I have like a JM and kind of an SS that's going to happen due to the names that we chose. Okay. When you're working in this section, the main portion of kind of what you're going to be working on is all through this drag and drop, right? When we look at the document, we know kind of visually where we would be expecting to sign, right? It's kind of right there. It's blatantly obvious, but we do need to kind of set out those actual signature spots for the participants, create that section that's going to be mandatory for them to complete. When you click on drag and drop, you'll notice it kind of pops up, gives you all of your options, and you'll see the description pretty quick, right? So we have sign here, an initial spot, a bit of a calendar timestamp, right? A whole bunch of different utilities here. Let's go ahead and just drag and drop the sign here option and see what happens for J Mark. Right, so just like that, bring his name over, try to center it as best we can, and we would have kind of one portion of what we're working on complete here. Okay. As far as just to notice as well, like I'll open that section back up in a moment. We'll add in a whole bunch of other ones. We still have 2 or 3 more that we need to do for Jay, but I do want to show you, right? Whenever you make the selection, notice that you can make changes to it, right? I can change the size of what I'm working on by kind of dragging and moving things around. Okay, it also comes up with a little bit of a garbage bin here if I wanted to get rid of it completely. Maybe I want to restart and kind of get back to the drag and drop and get that default size. There is also a little gear icon, right? So as soon as you select it, there's a gear and it gives you some more options. I have the sign here pointing in downwards fashion, right? Maybe I did want to flip that vertically, you know, have it so that it's coming from the bottom. Maybe when it was at the top, there was some words here that were being kind of hidden by just my sign here portion. So you can manipulate it a bit, make it look kind of the way that might be a little bit better with the kind of the shape of your document and everything. Okay, right now I've got it complete opposite horizontal. I'll probably just remove this and then get the default one back. But just notice you do have quite a few options there. So I'll end up drag and dropping this one. I'll just keep the default, keep it more simplified. There we go. Maybe I will go with the initial spot next, since it's kind of coming up next. We have JM. Just drop it in the section. Okay, and these selections that you're making, these end up being the mandatory portions that your participant has to complete, right? J, as our first participant, is going to see these as soon as this individual goes to make and complete their portion of the signing, which we're going to see together in a couple moments. We do also have a date spot, so I just dragged and dropped from the calendar, that little kind of stamp with the calendar. And we put that right there on the line. Okay, and I will actually go with initial here one more time. Maybe we'll do an extra one so that we could see more of the things that I have to complete. So we have basically 4 things that we set out for J. Okay, the date will happen automatically, which we'll see. 3 mandatory fields that J has to complete. He's got 2 initial spots, 1 signature spot, making the amount of kind of work that J has to complete. There's 3 things that he has to select when they get to it. At this point, we can switch our participant to Samantha, and just kind of being that ours is so straightforward, we're just going to replicate that kind of exactly what we did before. So we have the signer, Samantha Smith, at the top. And when we go to drag, we should see a little bit of a difference there. Okay. So I'm noticing even with the design that maybe we chose on this one, the sign here is kind of really impeding that other signature. It's kind of in the way a little bit. Maybe I will switch this vertically just so it looks a little bit better. That way nothing is kind of on top of a different portion, making it hard to read, right? So these might be totally opposite here. But what you'll end up noticing as well is when we look at it from the participant's perspective, the thing is your participant only sees the tasks that are assigned to them. So Jay, when he goes to sign this document, he's not going to see Samantha's sign here. That won't be in his way or anything like that. So even if it was in kind of his way a little bit, he wouldn't be seeing it, right? It'll become more clear in a couple of steps. I hope I described that correctly. But let's get those last couple finished up. We have SS for Samantha. Okay, and we have another one here. We'll just have Samantha initial on the side. There we go. Perfect. So just like that, we have set out all of the tasks that we're kind of asking our participants to complete. We have a participant 1 who is Jay and participant 2 who is Samantha, and we've kind of filled out the document here. So I chose a really simple kind of 1-pager here, but again, like just start thinking as we go through this process, right? Think of your agreement of purchase and sale. Think of all the spots that need to be initial, bottom of the pages, things like that. Well, everything that happened just now is going to translate through to whichever document you're working on. Okay, you could choose any document you'd like. It doesn't have to be necessarily a real estate transaction. Ours is just a silly document that I made on Word and saved as a PDF. But think about how this all kind of translates through, because the steps are all the same when you go to do them for your own transactions as well. All done with what we're working on. So we are going to click on that next button and kind of make our way to completion and sending out the invitations, of course. So let's click on that. We have a bit of a finalization step. We have a check mark on all 4 of our main steps, which is really good to see. Okay. And what we could do at this point is, well, it's telling us, right? We've kind of set up the creation of the signing. We can send out the invitations. Okay. And if we'd like, however, there is a customize invitations section where we can go in, and if you did want to personalize the emails a little bit, okay, if you were looking to, change this up just to have a bit more of a personalized message, so it's not the default, that's totally up to you. We are going to use the default, which means we're just going to send these invitations out. Okay, so let me go ahead and I'll click that, and we're just waiting for the participant 1 email to come in. That is meant for Jay, who I think I named Jay Mark. So let's go ahead and click send invitations. The AuthentiSign invitations were successfully sent. Okay. I noticed a little bit of a question come through in the chat, but just before I get to that one, I did want to complete this because the thing is, it is going to take a couple of minutes, right? We sent this one out at 1:43. It's probably going to be like 1:45 before it comes and actually hits my inbox at omdreb.ca. So I just wanted to make sure I confirmed that before I went through this question here. So the question that kind of hit me in the chat is, are there any options to change the colors for different signers? Okay, good question there. So I think if I understand that you're asking if maybe participant 1, let's say, was using like a blue pen and their name would come through in that color, and then participant 2 maybe was using more of a black ink, so that's easier to differentiate. Is that maybe... Hopefully that's, if that is what you mean by that. To tell you the truth, I've never actually tried to make that kind of change. I believe that just with the fact that it's kind of specific, it's signing, that it does have to be just the black standard kind of signature. But let's try and investigate that as we go through. Right now we're waiting for that email to come in. Okay, so in the meantime, because we're waiting to sign it as J, let me go into like one of my other tests here. What do we have going on in here? Did I even put in and design a document? Perhaps I didn't. Okay, yeah, this one's not complete enough. I do want to go have a look though. What would be the easiest way? Well, you can see here that at least in the list in general, you could see that I don't, I've used this for other transactions, right? If ever I needed to sign a vacation day from work, that kind of thing, I just end up, using this because you can use it to sign any document. That's the main thing to understand. So there was some follow-ups to the question. Let me just double check here. Not so much different ink colors, but more visual, that you can see both initials and not 2 for the same signer. Apologies, I'm not 100% sure that that I follow. I think I'm understanding that, like, maybe changing it so that it's easier visually while you're designing. Not that they're going to sign with a different color, that both participants are going to sign with the standard black ink, but hey, can you change the color so that you can easily tell that you have 2 for each of them? That's actually a really good point. I don't believe so, however. Okay. I would have to go in there and play around a little bit. Maybe we do keep that because it may take a little bit of time for us to kind of play around. I don't believe so. It sounds like a really good way to kind of, and I don't know if maybe you were used to using a different one, like if DocuSign offers that, or a different third-party one. Not to my knowledge that you can change it. But yeah, that's actually a really smart feature, so that you can tell really, really easily that you kind of like which one you're working with, especially if you had like you saw me stumbling when I was trying to choose the initials and the start of the person's name, because I would hate for it to be like both people with SS, even though one person is like, I don't know. I don't want to make up names because you saw how much I struggled just to come up with those 2 names. But if the initials were identical and you couldn't tell if it was one participant or the other, I could see how that would be confusing. So let's investigate that a bit more, maybe towards the end of the session, because it'll take us some steps. And I did already get that email in my inbox for 1:47. So I'd like to start talking about that for sure. So it just came in at 1:47. What I did want to bring to your attention as well, and I'll bring this right back on screen. Before we hop in there, I wanted you to notice a little bit about these statuses on this page as well. Okay, so we have 3 different status types when we're in the AuthentiSign section. Okay, you can see that I'm in that selection right now. And the first one, as we saw when we went in this kind of test that I had created, apparently in the month of January, well, I didn't have any participants. I didn't have any documents attached. This was just like a quick test that I was running, it looks like. And you could see that the image is listed as in wizard when I hover over it. So this is an indication that I never actually completed setting this one up. It's still just in those 4 steps and it's awaiting me to go in there and actually complete it. When you send out the invitations, however, it moves to this next image, right? As our invitation was being sent for ours, it's not a gear icon anymore. It's this lightning bolt, and it refers to the fact that the transaction is actually in progress. Okay. You can click on it and get more information about it, which we're going to do in a few steps anyways. But just notice that the third and final completion step here is once it's fully approved by all parties, it moves to like a bit of a ribbon of completion. Okay, let me grab that email again though, and let's have a look at what the participant sees. So I'll full screen this email. Maybe I'll zoom in a little bit more so we can see the letters better on the share screen. I can't zoom in on this top part, unfortunately, but at least the email I can go in a little bit on. Okay, we can see it came in at 1:47. I think we sent it at 1:43, if I remember. So it took about 4 minutes for it to show up. That gives you a little timeline for how soon your participant, in this case, J. Mark, would be receiving it. Okay, and things to note, absolutely, right? It comes from a very specific location. So it's sent from secure@authentisign.com, right? This might be a little bit tiny to see. I wish that I had a way of kind of zooming in on that so everyone can see it. But things to note, right? In case your participant ever asks, the destination that it comes from is actually secure@authentisign.com. Now we chose the default in our signing for that kind of signing message, right? We didn't make any changes to it. And this is what the default looks like. It just says signing invitation. Hello, J. Mark. Your representation, who in this case is Eric, is inviting you to participate as a signing party in an e-signature document signing. The signing name is very silly. It's just for training. And your participant has to click on the Start Signing button to get to that next step. So very much like when you're sending your client an auto email or a listing, they have to view the listing by clicking on the button, of course. Okay. So here we are with Start Signing. So I'm just going to click on this option and we'll have a look. We have a new tab that's popping up, and again, pretend that we are J. Mark in this case. We are acting as participant 1 in this transaction. Okay, so when your client comes in here for the very first time, they're faced with this Adopt Your Signature screen. Okay, they have access to sign this document. If they ever ask you, I don't have a DocuSign, or I don't have an AuthentiSign account. How am I going to sign this? Is it going to cost me money to sign it? Absolutely not. It's all part of this, like the part that that you have, which allows you to create the document and everything. That's all included, and your participant is never going to have to pay for an account or anything like that. They're able to enter and sign their portion. There's no fees associated to that. Okay. As far as the first screen that they're faced with when they click on that link in the email, you can see here that it gives a little bit of a default. We have J. Mark, a little bit of cursive going on, JM for the initials. And they first off have 2 options here. They can either draw their signature or they could choose a different font style. Okay. So if I was to draw the signature, right, this is not the one that I'm going to keep. I find this very, very tough to do, especially on the computer with a keyboard and mouse. I don't know, I would end up kind of doing a bit of a J, right? Like, I mean, this isn't me, so I mean, I'm just trying. Well, it looks like I just ended up with the letter K. So when you're on a computer, probably not the one that I would suggest. I just wanted to show you so that you know it's there. But yes, your participant can adopt more of a personalized signature if they'd like. That's available to them. Or they can click Select Font Style, and maybe they change it up a little bit. Okay. I am going to keep the default though, right? Like I'm kind of happy with how it looks, right? We're going to see that it does have its encrypted participant number and everything. So I'm happy with what's here. And they always have the option of going into any kind of consent disclosure, the end user license agreement, terms of service, all that kind of stuff, right? So they have access to the documents before clicking the accept button. But the whole idea here is like when they accept, right, they're accepting that they are going to be kind of that the information's correct, they're signing this document, they're adopting this signature here, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so I'm going to click accept. And we are faced with what kind of we spoke about a moment ago. Jay is only going to see participant one's selections that we made, right? Notice how when Jay comes in here, he's just not distracted by all of the sections that Samantha has to sign as participant 2. Okay, so make note of that. That's what I was trying to describe, right? Like even if Samantha had her words kind of coming in and kind of blocking a portion of this, it wouldn't be distracting Jay at least. Okay, so we've got kind of even looking at our one-page document. Before we even click anything, we can start to see a few things on this screen as a participant. Well, we have not started. Our progress is at 0. We could tell that because we've entered into this document, the timestamp has already happened. So we've calendar stamped it for the 25th of February, right? I didn't have to click on that or select it. And there's kind of 3 things that I'm expecting that we're going to have to do. These 3 selections. We also see that encrypted AuthentiSign ID that's attributed to Jay as a participant. Okay. A couple of ways that they can begin with their steps to completion here. If they click the start option, it'll kind of walk them through the 3 spots they have to complete. Or they could just start by, clicking on one of these, whichever one they want, and the system will just follow through with the other 2 that remain. They can always reject the document, or they can even exit the document, right? If I come in here and even if I make a selection, let's say, right, you saw this one ended up getting stamped with the initials after I clicked on it. Well, maybe I didn't mean to do that and I just want to exit. Well, they're more than welcome to do that at any point. Okay, if I exited, they can always return to the signing at a later time, as you see here. So if I close this and I gave us back that email wherever it's been tucked away, there we go, and then click start signing. Right, maybe he wasn't ready to sign it just yet, and there were some questions he had for his agent. Now that's all been sorted, and he comes back in here ready to sign. Okay, thing is, the document is not going to hit completion until not only that Jay has done all 3 of his tasks, but he also has to confirm that he's finished. Okay, you're going to see there will be like a complete button that has to be specifically selected to notify that he's complete with his steps. Okay. This time around, instead of clicking a random one, I'm just going to click the start button so we get a feel for what that looks like. Okay, so I'll just hit start here. Looks like it kind of works vertically. I don't know what word I was going with there, but it kind of it goes vertically and just scans through to do the top one. So it hit this part first. That's going to be the first portion that we have to sign. Okay, so the step that Jay has here is just clicking, right? You can see it's pointing at it from this left-hand side. It vertically hit this option that has to complete. And when Jay clicks on the option, right away it attributes the signature that he adopted on that first screen. So your participant has completed this portion. You can see an update towards the top. 33% of the work, of course, is done, being that we have 1 of 3 mandatory fields, and it is indicating what's the next one that Jay would be doing. So kind of vertically going down the pages, this one would be next, and it kind of moves us right to that next mandatory spot. We're at 67%, click that option, we're at 100%, right? We can either stay and review the document, or we can actually even complete the document right now. Just like how we reset it before by exiting, you can even decide that, you know what, maybe I did that too quick. I want to have another look. Okay, but if I hit stay and review, right, I stay and review, I read through, I make sure that everything is kind of in the correct spots that I wanted. Still though, I have not signed this document as a participant until I have formally clicked on one of the complete options. I have to click complete and formally say that I'm done with what I'm doing. Even if I exited right now, it wouldn't save this information. I would have to come back and have to click them again and make my way to the complete button. So it's really important that they actually complete what they're working on. Okay, let's say that we are done though. We saw we're at 100%. So let's hit complete and get that pop-up back where we can complete the signing. It'll load. Then your participant or your client does have one more little pop-up that will come up. Okay, and this will only come up if they've never signed using AuthentiSign before or have not set this up. So all this is, okay, is a little bit of a pop-up, and it probably won't come up for yourself if you've already gone through this, of course, as well. But if you haven't ever put in a password in here, what this is setting up is in the eyes of the participant, what this gives them is it gives them some like kind of, what's the best word for that? Like it gives them like a guest access to see the documents. So if they create a password, they have a temporary account that's just set up using this password so that they can go in and they can see copies of the document and they can access them. And at a future date, they can always just download the signed documents or see the history, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so I've never set this up because I like this pop-up coming up so I could talk about it, of course. But your client, right, they might put in a quick password, and then if they ever want to access the signed documents, that would give them access next time, or if they just go to AuthentiSign to go and search for that. Okay, great. It would I'd put in some info here, and it would send me some details to my email. I'd get a confirmation that I set up a bit of a guest account, of course. Okay, I'm going to hit no thanks. Because I do need this to come up so I could talk about it. So if I entered a password, this wouldn't come up for me anymore. I would no longer be a guest. Okay, so I'm going to hit no thanks. And we have our confirmation screen. We can see that, hey, attention Jay, you've completed your portion of the process. This is your ID, right? All that kind of stuff. Click here to access the dashboard and the progress and all that kind of stuff. If you have any questions, reach out to your representation. This is the individual that set up your signing, of course. Okay, so this is a confirmation for Jay. We just finished the work as the participant, and I could close up the window now. I've even received an email already in my email telling me that, hey, something has updated. So let me open up that email. Same thing, I'll just full screen it and switch this to maybe a closer view. Zoom in 150. Perfect. Signing any document, the signing has been updated. It's also coming from secure@authentisign.com, and it's telling us the signing is updated. Hello, Eric. Now it's sending me an email notification to me as an organizer. Eric, an action has taken place. The document's been accepted. It's dated, time-stamped, and it was by J Mark, our first participant, and it gives us that encrypted kind of reference to J Mark. Okay, so Jay's done his work. Perfect. Okay, and what we're going to do at this point is we're just going to hop in and have a look to see the progress from inside of our actual kind of bubble here within AuthentiSign. Try and have a look at how it's coming along. So when we click on this, some things to expect, right? Well, we chose our participants we're going to sign in order, which means now that Jay has completed his portion, what is next is Samantha has to complete hers, but we sent it to a fake email address that's going to bounce back. So let's start to have a look at that. We're going to notice some red markings definitely when we click on this option, okay? And I just saw an email pop into my inbox as well, which we'll talk about in 2 seconds. So when we make our way in, we could see the dashboard for this particular one, which is our signing any document for training. We could see that J Mark in general here with the Eric at OMDREB email, okay, has, being that they're a remote signer, they've already authenticated and signed, it changes to a bit of like a checkered flag, where this one here for Samantha Smith is still awaiting completion, right? It's like in progress. It'll eventually move to the checkered flag when it's complete. However, we did get a bit of an error that happened. The AuthentiSign email service has detected a problem with the email provided. Please contact the recipient to see if the email address is correct. Okay, so it looks like our fake email address did not work at all. Okay, and we might have to do a little bit of kind of changes there. We'll do that in a second. Some other things to see. We have document versions towards the bottom. We can see that the original document is here. It is followed up by the document for signing any document first revision. If we click on that one, we'll see the work that that J Mark has completed, of course. So if we click on that, right, as the organizer, we have access to see everything that's done so far. If Samantha ends up finishing her portion, well, we would see a second revision followed by a completed document, of course. Okay. I do want to show you this email before we switch this really quick, right? If I go and get that email, it came in at 2:02, so just about a minute ago. I'll zoom in so we can read that a bit better. There we go. And what we have is for Samantha Smith, the signing invite failed. Your signing invite was not delivered to this ridiculous email. Please correct the email address and resend. Okay, so notice some things that are happening here. Well, what it does, right? I can't go in and I can't just like at this time decide to change the name. I can't just say, hey, no, that was actually supposed to be Joanna, not Samantha, right? I can't make that kind of switch. However, you can change the destination email if something like this occurs and maybe you made a bit of a typo or a spelling mistake and it didn't arrive at the correct destination. Okay, so if I click edit, you'll notice it will only give me the option to change the email, right? It's not going to let me change the type of signer. It's not going to let me make changes to the individual's name or anything like that. However, we can change this. If we wanted, maybe Eric at OMDREB is the correct one, and then we would hit save and it would resend that email. Okay. In our case though, I'm just going to hit close. We're not going to make the change ourselves. It's just so that you could see that it's there. But this does really kind of, cover all those different parts that we were looking to see. Of course, the rest is pretty straightforward. As soon as we make this change, we would expect that email to come in much like how it came in for Mark. And when Samantha completes her portion, just like that, that's both of our participants, and there'll be a final copy of the document, the one that we're actually going to send to our different parties, whether it's, are we sending this to the lawyer for review? Are we like, whatever the case, or putting it for your own records? Maybe it was just by a representation agreement and it's just meant to be between yourself and your participant, and there you're done with your two individuals. Okay. So just going to click on the pen. We're going to exit out of that transaction. And really the steps that we saw, it does wrap up that first half of our session. That first portion, that was just kind of showing us all those different sides of signing a document and completing that from the client's perspective. So you got to see the emails that come through, the steps that your client is going to be taking. And what I would really, really suggest, just like what we done together here for today's session, please do try that yourself. Okay. Try that, maybe explore a little bit, throw in some extra options kind of thing. I went with a really simplified version where we just stuck to a couple of signings, a couple signature spots, couple initials, but definitely like choose a document, right? If you have a couple of emails that you want to test with, maybe you'll send it to yourself. Do the same thing as that we did in the session, and then you really get a good feel for any questions that your client may have when they do the e-signature, right? Because maybe not every single customer or client is going to be familiar with AuthentiSign and the steps, and they might ask you, hey, I don't know what to do. Can you walk me through it? You want to be prepared for that. Okay, so I would definitely suggest just kind of doing the steps that we did. It gives you a really, really good feel for that. Awesome. So it does wrap up the AuthentiSign stuff. If any other questions pop up in your head about AuthentiSign, let's maybe feel free to put them in the chat, but I will end up addressing them more in the question and answer once we conclude, because definitely this web forms portion still a lot to discuss just before the 3 o'clock mark that we have for the end of the session here. So I'm definitely going to be transitioning into that portion right now. Okay, so that's everything for the first half. Let's start talking about all those things that I mentioned with regards to that introductory web forms half of the session. Okay, so as we know, at least we've already covered how to get here, right? Whether we are going to webforms.ca and using RealtorLink to come directly, or if we're going into our matrix system, going into itsorealestate.ca and selecting it from the tools section and clicking on web forms. Either way, right, we know the path to get to this utility. What we want to do at this point, I'm going to start out by talking about these options that I have on my main screen here on my dashboard. And we'll kind of go in this kind of direction towards the other menu options. There's a lot of optional pieces on here, right? And I just want to say a few words about them. Let's get really familiar, set a good foundation for using web forms, so you have a really good direction for it if you are approaching your first transaction in the near future. So starting with the dashboard here, okay, I'm going to talk really briefly about these three tools that we have on the dashboard. We have a lock unlock button, a how do I, which is like a little TV screen with a question mark, and a quick start option that we're going to talk about as well. I'll start with the little lock unlock. Okay, and this is the piece that allows you to manipulate what is available on your dashboard. Okay, if I unlock, I would notice that there is a new section that kind of pops up here, allows me to manipulate what I can put on screen, right? I can take something like, sorry, you can reshape things, right? I can drag something down that's in the list, see it populate here. Okay, and what ends up happening is all the blue options are more like action buttons, right? I would create something or start something new, whereas the green selections that you have are more like previews and lists. You saw me pull down the pen, and it ended up being like a preview of my AuthentiSign section. You can also close these out, and they just pop back into the list. So if I close them all out, they would all be hidden into this menu, and if I locked, I would have nothing on my dashboard. And it'll say drag and drop widgets to get started. Okay, so just notice you can set it up however you'd like, right? Yours probably look very different than mine when we started the session. And this would be why. You could completely manipulate it. The way I had mine set up, of course, I just had, I think I had this transaction button on it. I had a little bit of a create button for AuthentiSign as well. I moved it to the side. And I think I had a list of my transactions that I dragged down, and I just kind of resized it a bit to fit the screen. So in effect, you really can just make this as busy as you'd like, or you can kind of simplify it. I went for a bit more of a simplified feel for the utilities that work for me, right? If you're using a lot of the other ones and you like having them on your dashboard, please feel free to put as many as you'd like. You just unlock, get your drop down, and you can work with the options that are there. Something to note, because I do see a couple members that are here on different devices, is the display might look a little bit different, right? Maybe if you're on a tablet, it'll look a bit different. I'm on a Windows laptop for this session, so I'm seeing specifically a bar towards the bottom that I can drag and drop to the side if I want to move over. I know that I've done this in the past on even like an Apple laptop or a MacBook Air, and instead of the bar showing up, it's more like built into the feature where you use like 3 fingers on your trackpad and you swipe to the side, and then it just kind of moves in that direction. Okay, so depending on the device that you're on, maybe it feels or visually looks a tiny bit different, but it is really generally the same stuff. You unlock, you can move side to side, see your options, and drag and drop them on screen. Okay. So very next one, really quick description of these two options, which are, they're referring generally to the same thing. These are just help guides. Okay. If I wanted something like, you know, a feature that's maybe more advanced in web forms, something like creating a transaction template. Well, if I've never done that before and I'm curious on the steps, well, maybe I can access a little bit of this help section, which is the quick start and the how do I, and it'll give me a little bit of a walkthrough how to actually go about creating a transaction template. The quick start section is more of like a detailed step-by-step with images and screenshots, whereas the how do I just ends up being a really short video about it. Kriya put together all these resources. I think they're all under, I want to say under 2 minutes. I know they're under 5 minutes. I almost want to say that most of them are under 2 minutes even, but they're just super quick little videos that'll walk through the selections to make. So if you ever needed to look into those, they're right here on the side, right? If I click on one, sometimes if you've been working on something else for a while, it might ask you to log back into RealtorLink. We'll see that. If it, oh, it looks like mine went through. Okay, so you might notice how it is through RealtorLink. So it may sometimes ask me, hey, choose Oakville Milton and just log in again if you went inactive. But I just clicked on Quick Start. It popped up this tab, and it has very much of a textbook table of contents feel to it. I have an introduction. I have like a body section and some appendixes, and I clicked by accident, sorry. and and we have this appendix section. Completely erased that thing that popped up. I don't know what I clicked in here. I must have clicked inspect by accident. But yes, your table of contents here, right? If I was, remember, we're thinking about creating a transaction template. Well, perhaps we're going to go working with web forms, look at our options, working with transaction templates, creating a transaction template. So it kind of is like looking through the menu, getting where I need to be. And as I said, right, it's going to be this detailed explanation of where to go to get that done. Okay, very similar when you click the how do I. This one is just all the video options. There's going to be a video about transaction templates as well. You just kind of go through the menu options and make your selection. Very, very similar. Both of them are very, very similar. Just a different learning style if you prefer seeing a quick little video rather than seeing the step-by-step instructable. Okay, perfect. So kind of wraps up our first option here. We're all done with the dashboard, which is nice. I'm going to go down this menu as we kind of point out some options. Some of them I'll just say a few words about. Let's see. So transactions here, right? We had a transaction list on our dashboard because we dragged it down, right? But you'll notice that when you're in this section, you do get more manipulation options, right? When I'm on the dashboard, when I look at 33.3 New Street and all this stuff, it's very basic. It's just a glimpse at my transactions. If I actually come into the formal transaction section, I'm going to see so much more, right? I can perhaps see even sometimes a preview if there was an attached image. I can see menu options. I can make selections, right? A lot more is available to me when I go directly to the spot, but in your dashboard, you can choose to have a preview of this section. Okay, an add button when we're ready to create a new one, maybe towards the end of the session. Okay, a concept that is going to pop up pretty often throughout the other screens we're going to use is the idea of the basket. Whenever you're doing more than, one thing at a time, like if I want to add 2 forms to my transaction later on, let's say, well, there's going to be a basket. Whenever you select more than one thing, notice how they pop into the basket. I selected 4, there's 4 in the basket. If I want to manipulate all 4 at the same time, the basket will give you your options. If I wanted to delete all 4, I could do that, or I could get rid of 1 and delete 3 of them. So whenever you select multiple options, goes in the basket. A little obscure menu that you have as well in this, for each individual one in this case of the transaction screen, is this little 3-dot menu. So call it whatever you want. The snowman, the stoplight, it's a tucked away little menu that sometimes has some really important options in it. So not to be overlooked. Okay, you can maybe make some more selections there. Of course, if we wanted to go right into a transaction, have a closer look, we can always do that as well by clicking the title. But I think that's enough for this screen just for now. We'll come back to transactions because we do have to create one together at the end of the session anyways. AuthentiSign we have covered from top to bottom. I'd say we covered a good 90% of what's in here. The rest is just kind of for you to explore a little bit. So that one's pretty well covered. When we get to forms, here's the section where you can see the standardized forms that are all available to you on the system. Right? If I wanted to track down an agreement of purchase and sale and perhaps just download it, a blank version of it to my computer, well, rather than start a transaction, maybe I'll just hop into forms, click on my OREA folder, choose my agreement of purchase and sale, kind of get in there, do a quick transaction, or kind of a, I guess, like a quick little, I forget what it's called, a standalone form, I think. If I click on this, it'll give me the option, create new form, standalone form, right? If I did a standalone form, I could just print it, download it to my computer, that kind of thing. The main part I just want you to make note of when you're in the form section, though, is definitely the way that the documents or the options in here are organized, because they're all organized in these folders. It's almost like it looks like cloud storage in here, right? All of the different boards have their own folders. There's like folders that have specific titles, like a FinTrack, the OREA folder, things like that. And you do have a keyword search whenever you're looking in these sections as well. If I knew in my mind, like, okay, what I'm looking for is, I don't know, like a FinTrack form of some sort, well, I can always just type, I don't know, this one's just the one on my mind right now. If I typed in FinTrack, right, it would only put in the FinTrack options. Do I want the receipt of funds record, right? It kind of specifies. So if I ever wanted to do just like an agreement of purchase and sale, maybe I can type in part of that keyword and all the purchase and sale, everything that has it in the title would show up, which might be distracting as well. So do be careful kind of the one that you are using in the keyword search, of course, but it might kind of help you, right? Like if I wanted my waiver, maybe I know that it's a 1, 2, 3 waiver, and just like that, I'm at my OREA version of the 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that kind of just, of course, you're going to be a lot better at choosing the right ones and knowing what your, the number for your buyer representation, all that kind of stuff. But in the meantime as well, right? Whenever you click on this folder for OREA, know that you have like your 800 or 900 standardized forms in there, and you continue to make your selections. We'll see that in more detail, of course, when we get to adding an agreement of purchase and sale to our transaction at the end. Let's move into documents. And documents would be the start of our bells and whistles that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so you have a section called documents within WebForms, and what it allows you to do is it gives you cloud storage for a couple of different file types. You can save images, you can save PDF documents, different things like that in here. So let's have a closer look. If I go to my folders, I created a folder here called Eric's Training Resources, right? I could always create a folder by clicking on the Add button. We'll go into this one, and you'll notice I put some files in here that are available to me at any time. Even if I went into WebForms on my cell phone or on my tablet, well, I would still have access to these documents and I could share them with my client. That would be the point, right? You have a space here that you can save information, which means that you can access it from any device. Notice some of the file types. I have 2020 training dates, which seems to be an Excel file. We have a couple image files like PNG and JPEG, as well as Word documents. It also accepts PDF. So I think what we're going to do is, just in the sake of the training here, let's go ahead and add this PDF, test signing for AuthentiSign. We'll add it here as a document. Okay. So in order to do that, I'm going to click the Add button. Do I want to create a new folder, or do I want to just add a document? We'll just go with option new document here. Okay, so what is it asking us to do? It says you can upload up to 20 files at once, drag and drop, or click here to upload. Okay, so I think what I'm doing is, since I have it right on screen, I'll just kind of make my screen a little bit smaller and drag this over until it's in the space and let go. Perfect. So we added the document, and now it's available here on WebForms if ever I need it again. I don't have to go to my computer. I could just do it on my phone or whatever the case may be. It's here and it's stored here until I choose to delete it. So if I click on test signing for AuthentiSign, it will give me a preview of the document. And from now on, whatever device I'm on will allow me to kind of start assigning with it. I could print it, I could download it to the device that I'm on. So instead of let's say, instead of using a USB stick and moving it from one laptop to another, if I wanted it in here and it was a Schedule B that I use often, or whatever the case may be, right? You can put in some standardized documents that maybe it's just your own branding, something you want to attach on a transaction and you'd like it to be there. Or maybe it's just a really quick how-to that tells your client how to sign any document that helps them with their steps when they sign things on AuthentiSign, for example, right? You would create that, save it here, and you could just attach it to your transaction. Your client would see it as they go through the document, that type of thing, okay? I mean, whatever the case may be, I'm just making stuff up as options here, but just kind of, if you're thinking about what this is useful for, right, you can add some documents and have them on all your devices. If you are curious about which types of files it will accept, by the way, what you could do is you can add a file that it won't accept. So if I go like this and I drag this PowerPoint file, well, I know that it won't accept a PowerPoint file, but I'm going to do it just so that I could show you the error message, okay? So I tried to pull in that PowerPoint, which was kind of the slide that I used at the beginning, just this kind of silly little slide. But if I try to add PowerPoint, it will stop me. It'll say, nope, you can only upload the following files. So we have Word documents, Excel documents, short, kind of like a GIF, which is like a repeatable video that does not have any sound. Okay. And followed by a whole bunch of different image files as well as PDF. Okay. So you'll notice that it is a specific set of files that you can attach, but generally the ones you see here, are the types that will apply to, most likely the ones that will apply to a real estate transaction. So you have access to do that. I'm just going to hit close. We're finished up with our section here, but just again, be aware that you do have a document section that can serve this purpose. Okay. Our very next one here, maybe this one is not used that often. Don't put too much bearing on the things I chose. I chose some silly titles and stuff like that while I was testing, but the task section really is just a glorified reminders section. It's like a reminders app that, since WEBForms can be used to collaborate with other ones of your or other colleagues that you have, right? Maybe you use tasks a little bit as a way to remind yourself or your assistant or whoever, maybe a cooperating agent, of certain work that is required on a transaction. Hey, Mark, don't forget that, can you go in and can you add MLS information to this particular listing by 12 o'clock? Well, yourself and your colleague, you would be able to see this completion happen if you assigned a task to another team member that is part of your brokerage, let's say. Okay, so a bit of a reminder section. It could be a reminder for yourself. It could be a reminder for a colleague that you work with. You can set that up and the two of you would get updated as things progress. Okay. Faxing, not to spend too much time on some of these, right? Maybe you don't ever go into this section at all whatsoever. There is an e-faxing service that you have access to. My understanding here is that, well, Lone Wolf is a big player in real estate platforms, and apparently in the US, faxing is still used pretty often, so there is a button here. Okay, so if you don't use it at all whatsoever, I understand we've moved far from that, and we're really on to kind of using AuthentiSign. Using an e-signature is probably the most common method now. Right, but if you don't use faxing, just ignore it, continue right past it. You don't ever have to actually use it. Okay, in our contacts section, next one up here, right, you'll notice mine are not, I don't have a lot in here, okay, and I have my own kind of personal reasons for that, but the way that you manage your business is going to be different than mine, of course, right? I just want you to be aware in this section, however, if you want all of your contacts, there is a way that you can import them at once, but there is only one way. So you have to work around it. And when you go to the add button, you will see the description of it. You can add contacts from Google. So let's say I have 400 contacts, and for some reason, I want all 400 in my WEBForms account. Not a personal decision I would make, but hey, if you want to have that, no problem. You can import them from Google. All that means is you have to get them to Google first. Okay, so if you have them all in your contacts list on Outlook, let's say, well then create a quick Gmail account, just import them from Outlook to Gmail, and then you can import all 400 as soon as you do it from that Google portion. Okay, so it is just the one, like I can't import from Outlook or import from a different option, unfortunately, but if that is your goal, right, and you have 400, it's going to be a lot faster to just create a quick Google account and import them than it is entering all 400. So just know the option is there. My personal kind of look on contacts in general, though, is probably going to be a little different than most other individuals, and that's just in my mind. When I create a contact, I only am going to take the time to put them in here if I have like a guarantee in my mind that I'm going to use them more than once on a transaction. At the end of the day, this is my WEBForms section. Am I going to use the same lawyer on 6, 7 different transactions this year? If the answer is yes, I'll probably create the information and type in this lawyer's address, their email, their phone number, their business number, all that kind of stuff, right? In my mind, that makes sense, and I'm going to take the time for it because I'm going to keep using them on multiple transactions. If that's my real estate lawyer, I'm going to add them in. I'm probably not going to add in all 400 of my personal contact list because I might not even transact with their information between now and the end of the year, let's say. So my version is I just choose the important ones. If you have a different outlook on that, just bring in your contacts. You have the option to bring them all in, okay? Into the setup. Open this up here. Okay, so the setup is one that we definitely don't have enough time to do every single option in here, but I do want to give you a bit of like an overview, okay? This is a very, very important section. When it comes to your setup, here is where you set the groundwork that's going to save you an immense amount of time later on down the road, right? The way that WebForms is meant to be used is using features like transaction templates, okay? A transaction template, right, might not be completely clear right now, but basically what you're doing if you create a template is you're creating like a cookie cutter that is standardized for a transaction that you do often. Maybe on the side you do a lot of residential leases. Well, you'll probably set up a transaction template with very standardized clauses, standard forms, the things you always end up needing, and at the click of a button, that transaction is already ready to go. Technically also means that you can do it from any device if you have the template ready. You don't have to sit there and drag in 8 different forms. Your template's already ready to go. It's your cookie cutter for residential leases, right? So notice you have some groundwork in these options, some things to go explore. Transaction templates is one of those advanced options that really, really do save a lot of time on WebForms, okay? But it takes kind of coming in here and working on them. This is also the section where you would go in and do your personal clauses. If you have office clauses, I'll just click on it real quick. I'm not going to spend too much time in here, but if I click on clauses, I will see the different kind of folders that I have. The personal clauses, mine is totally blank. I haven't added any for myself, right? But if your lawyer gave you some clauses, you would come in here and you would add them. If your office is sharing any clauses, and then you have the whole set of system clauses, which is the standardized clauses, okay? I'm going to go back to setup though. So just notice some of these kind of big ticket items. Towards the end of the session, as soon as we're done with the formatting on our agreement of purchase and sale, I'm going to try and remember to just say a few words about the program settings. Okay, definitely make your way in here, have a look, right? Preferences would be things with my own account. If I want to perhaps make a quick update to my email that I use, I would go in the preferences and I would see the option for it. Okay, that's just things with your own account. Program settings are different little tweaks that you can make, and I'll click on it so you can see the view of it, right? It'll make more sense when we come back to this at the end of the session, once we've seen the transaction, once we've seen a form and things like that. But notice you have the little drop-down box for all the different things that you might experience in WebForms. What I want to kind of prepare you for is maybe there is a really, really simple option in here that you can just make a change to that is going to make things so much more efficient later on down the road. So keep it at the back of your mind. We'll be sure to highlight it just when we conclude. Okay, but groundwork. Setup is all about the groundwork that you're setting to make everything more efficient when you use WebForms. App Store we've already covered. It's where you attach a third-party signing option. And then we have the pretty simple ones, right? Support, if we need to report maybe an error or something that's not working for us, right? We can reach out, support, or we could log out. So wraps up that whole section. What menu options we have on this left-hand side. Okay, so as I mentioned, last piece that we're going to do is we will actually do the kind of introduction to adding and creating our own transaction. So if we go back to our dashboard, we're going to be able to see that we have a create transaction button. We can either start there and it would give us a pop-up. Okay, showing us that we can name it. We have options towards the bottom. Or we can always go to the transaction section, right? I have the action button here because I set it, but if you don't have it, right, maybe you like going to transactions and clicking the add button, and it's the same exact destination. A little pop-up where you could start creating that transaction. Very, very similarly to AuthentiSign, when we created that one at the start of the session, there's only one mandatory field right now, and it's naming the transaction. So it looks like I'm going to go with, right, however you end up choosing your title is totally up to you. I'm just going to choose our Navy Street location and pretend that it's for Samantha. Was it Samantha Smith that we were using? Let's highlight Samantha Smith a little bit. We overused J Mark. That's enough of that double first name. So 125 Navy Street, Samantha Smith. Okay. A little bit of the property, a little bit about the main individual that this is for. As far as these other options on screen, they're exactly that. They're totally optional. None of them have a red asterisk, so technically you don't have to make a selection with the rest of them. Okay. We have first off the type. This portion of type won't actually affect the transaction. This is only for your own records. This is for yourself, how you like to organize things on WebForms. Do I want this to be part of my residential leases on WebForms? Do I want it to be as a residential listing? Totally up to you. I'm going to leave it as none. We're going to keep these pretty blank just for the example. Import data. Select source. All right. Are we bringing in any MLS information on this particular transaction? Is 125 Navy Street, is there an MLS number that we want to type in? Is it on the Oakville Milton portion of It's a Real Estate, right? Right now we're not importing any information, but if we were, we would just choose Oakville Milton. We would type in that 400 number, which represents this listing. Next up, we have add me as. So we get to choose, okay, are we actually participating in this transaction, right? Do we want our credentials to pop in as the listing salesperson, as the cooperating salesperson, as both? We're just going to choose neither. And then the final little portion that's left here is when we click create, do we want to be pushed into the wizard? We're going to talk more about the wizard in just like 2-3 minutes here, but all it really is just a step-by-step of how to approach a transaction. Do we want it to just tell us which one is more generally the first thing we should tackle, or do we want to go into the transaction with any direction? Maybe we have enough background, we know what we're kind of getting into. But I'll show you the wizard and you can make that decision for yourself if you like it or not. I'm going to leave it unchecked. We'll activate the wizard manually ourselves in a second. So all I've done, I just named it, and everything else is optional, unselected, and blank. And I'm just going to hit create. So we'll hit create. Where we are going to land is on the details page of the transaction. So everything that we're doing moving forward now has to do with our transaction 125 Navy Street, Samantha Smith. Okay, there's something very, very important to understand about the fact that we're inside of the transaction right now. And that is the idea that, like, notice here the screen in general. Well, we know that if we click on this left-hand 3-line menu, this little stack, that we get the options that have to do with our overall WebForms account. Even from here, I can go back to my dashboard. I can go right into documents, right into the App Store of my WebForms account. That's still all on the left. When you're in a transaction, however, you get a new menu that pops up on the right. This right-hand menu specifically has to do with the transaction at hand. If I want to look at the forms that are attached to this Samantha Smith transaction, I would click on forms over here. It's on the right. It refers to this transaction. Okay. The left-hand side is the overall account. If I want to see the standardized forms, right, it's going to navigate me right out of this transaction if I click on it, because this is more the overall WebForms. Okay, I'm in the transaction right now. I'm going to want to do selections from the right. These ones refer to the transaction at hand. My transaction has its own dashboard. Okay, it has its own details section. The set of contacts for this transaction is accessed from the right, just like every other menu option. Okay, this whole menu, just to drill that in one last time, is for this transaction. Okay, let's go back to the detail screen. Okay, again, and even when you saw the dashboard as well, like it's understandably quite blank. We haven't added a form yet to 125 Navy. It should be blank. Okay, but you can add your own preview options to this dashboard if you'd like. Everything here has to do with this transaction. What I'd like to do is I'm just going to go to the detail screen and I'll give you a bit of info here before, and we're going to activate the wizard next, pretty much. Okay. If I look at this detail screen, something really important to notice is, well, it starts with details, it starts with all the property information. When you scroll down, you get your listing information. If you go further yet, you get transaction dates towards the bottom, right, where you enter your contract date, all that kind of stuff, closing date. Okay. When I activate the wizard, you'll notice that the shape of the screen might change slightly, but it's just going to walk me through the different options. It'll say, hey, maybe it's time right now to do your detail section, and you're going to follow it up by adding your contacts, let's say. Right? The wizard is just going to tell me which 5 steps to do as I approach the transaction. And you'll see that now, right? I can go to forms right now as my first step if I want, or if I click on the wizard, well, it's going to structure it a little bit if you prefer that. So I'll click wizard on the top right, and you'll see the screen is just changed ever so slightly. It says wizard, details happens to be the first step of 5. Okay. So like notice this, now I'm working through this menu. I would be on the detail screen, I'd put in information. When I hit next, it puts me into step 2. That's what this wizard concept is doing. It's just walking you through the more general steps in your transaction. Step 2 is going to be transaction dates. I want to say it follows up with contacts, followed by forms and things like that. Okay, so let's go to step 2. We've got transaction dates. That was previously at the bottom of the detail section. Make our way over to contacts. Then we have forms, and then we have documents, and we can hit finish. Or hit done, sorry, there we go. So when we're finished with everything, we're done. And when you're done with the wizard, you land on the transaction dashboard, which is the same as clicking here. I didn't add any forms when we got to that portion, which was step 4, so it's still understandably quite blank. That is all the wizard is doing, okay? So whether you choose to use the wizard or not is totally up to you. I'm sure that some individuals are going to prefer that structure that it has. Just personally, I like to take any direction. Maybe I just want to go straight to my forms and deal with those first. You're going to choose the preference that you have, and the wizard is just something there that give you a bit of direction. Okay. Let's go back to the detail screen. I'm going to say a few words about that, and then we will actually add a form in the form section. So what I want to show you here about the detail screen is understanding that this section does something very, very specific. Okay, this is your distribution form, which sends out information to all of the forms that you eventually attach to your transaction. If I type something in here and I type in street number, street name, let's say, street number 125, street name Navy Street. If I add an agreement to purchase and sale, I add some FinTrack forms, I add whatever the case may be, later on, and a street number field and a street name field exist on those forms that I add, well, this distribution form is going to send the information from here over to those forms as soon as I add those forms in. That's what this details section does, okay? There is something very unique about the way this section works as well. It is going to ask you to confirm the changes. So before, I was just jumping from details to forms, from details to contacts, or wherever the direction I wanted, right? And nothing was popping up on screen. Now that I've typed something, however, I've made an actual change, a change that might affect 8 legal documents later on down the road. The system is aware of that, and it's going to ask me to confirm if I did in fact want to make that change. Okay, if I click on forms right now, it's not going to let me go immediately. There's going to be a confirmation pop-up. You're about to leave the page. Would you like to save your changes? It's referring to the fact that I entered 125 Navy Street here, and I'm going to say yes. Now I'm on the forms section, and we can add in some forms. Okay. Everything looks extremely similar to the previous screens when we were working in AuthentiSign, when we were working on the transaction, adding in a new transaction. If we want to add the forms here, we just click the add button. We get a pop-up. I'll just wait for that to load. There we go. Okay, and we can see that it looks a lot like the way that our standardized forms were all organized when we were in the form section before, when we were looking at that left menu. I can search for the forms I want to add by typing in a keyword, or we can go into the individual folders. So let's just take that approach. I know we want an agreement of purchase and sale just to have something kind of standard that applies to a lot of situations. So let's go ahead and just add that document. Sorry, add that form. I keep interchanging that word and I do apologize. Let's add that agreement of purchase and sale. We will notice that it goes into our basket. If I click add, it'll just add the one form. Maybe there are some other ones I want to add first though, like have a look. If I click on 4 of them, they're all in my basket. I can always add all 4 or all 3 at the same time by clicking add. Just the same way that I can go back to the individual forms and just leave this one selected. I know it's in my basket. Maybe I do want more forms though, so I'm not ready to hit add just yet. Don't put too much bearing on the forms I choose. They're probably going to contradict each other. Not the point there. I do want to just grab a couple random ones though, so that you can see how they come in. So if I did earlier, we looked at the 1, 2, 3 waiver, right? Maybe I'll just pull that one in. All I have to do is select it. It's already in my basket. I can get rid of my selection. I could type something new. Maybe we'll go in the FinTrack section and get, I don't know, a receipt of funds record, whatever the case may be. Okay, now I've got 3 forms, and if I look at my basket, I'll see it is an agreement of purchase and sale, a waiver, and a receipt of funds record. Okay, if you're looking for the types of forms you should have for a specific type of transaction, please, that is absolutely something to reach out to your broker manager for, not something for the board level. I'm just here to show you kind of how to put in, work through the utility so you're comfortable using this feature. Okay, so I'm going to hit add. We're just going to add those 3. Not that there's any bearing or kind of comparison between these, but just want to show you some features here. So the fact that we have 3 forms now, right? If we clicked on our dashboard, we'd be able to tell that there's something finally going on, right? It's not saying that the form section is blank. We actually have some forms now. If I go back to my form section, I could see them here. You can, in fact, change the order of these forms as well. The very similar way that we were using AuthentiSign. Remember, we went to the left-hand side. The crosshair shows up. You can drag them and drop them. It might be a little bit obscure, but it only shows up when you hover the minuscule preview that no human being in the history of the world would be able to read. This preview has got to be the smallest thing I've ever seen in the entire world. So it's not there for you to read it, I guess. It's just, instead of being a stack of gray lines with AuthentiSign, they chose to put, I don't know what kind of individual can read that, but that's the preview. All right, if you want to see the document though, you can always just click on the title and go and have a look at it, and that's what we're going to do shortly here. What we're hoping to see though, if you remember, is we typed in a street number and a street name on the details section. It should still be there because we saved our work. And what we're hoping is that when we go into our form section and we click our agreement of purchase and sale, that has distributed from our details screen, and it should be right up on that first page in our street number and street name fields. So we'll just wait for this to load. And we're hoping that, perfect, we have a box here that is the street number box, and this is the street name box, and we properly did get information from our details screen. So just notice, right, how it came from that location where we entered it. It's over here on our form section. We are in fact in this new kind of stage of our transaction though. We're working inside the agreement of purchase and sale. So just to show you, right, whenever you're using web forms, and this is the case as well for when you're using ITSO Real Estate or using Matrix, you need to get into the habit that you're staying far away from this backward arrow key. Okay, if I ever want to move, you want to move in a forward direction, not a backward direction. So forget that these even exist, these back and forward backspace things. If I want to get back to that previous screen I was on that had those 3 forms, if I just hit save and exit, it would put me right back into that space. Let it load, I'm right back here, right? If I like move in a forward direction, I can go back in, I can hit save and exit, I can go back in, right? You can move in in kind of those directions, but I would never go into my agreement of purchase and sale and then click back. It might affect the timestamp, it might affect that auto save feature that's there, right? You want to get into the habit of moving in a forward direction, such as this save and exit. We're working inside of the transaction, we're just into the form now, and we can always go back to the transaction by exiting. Okay. I'm going to zoom out just once here because I can't see the other side of the form just for this. Oh, actually I can. There we go. That'll work. I just moved it slightly over and we can see the other side of it. Perfect. I'm not going to spend too much time going over this menu, but maybe I can give it maybe 2-3 minutes here just to highlight a couple pieces. Okay. So notice that when you're in the form, your menu options are towards the top of the screen now. Some things that are probably pretty familiar are things like the file menu, right? If you're used to using Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel, well, there's going to be a file menu where you can go file, print, file, save. Maybe I want to save it as an editable PDF to my computer, whatever the case may be, right? So think about the things you'd have in your file menu. File, exit, okay? There is a way on the form that you can make quick little edits to visual features like the actual the actual font. I don't even know what to say about this font. It's like some sort of scary default font that reminds me of old DOS programming or something like that. Like this is probably the most strange font I've ever seen as a default font, but if you prefer things like Times Bold or whatever the case may be, maybe this is a time that you change up the font. Okay. Clause button we're going to come back to, of course. We're going to add some clauses to this form shortly. There is a transaction forms button. This is a navigation option. I'm working on my agreement of purchase and sale. If I want to jump into that receipt of funds that we added in, I would click on this and I could just go straight to the receipt of funds. So you got some navigation options towards the top as well. Same as navigating to the multiple pages of this APS. If I want to go to the Schedule A of my agreement of purchase and sale, I'm expecting it's on page 6. I could just kind of fly right down to that. Some of these I don't really know what to say about, but if you need help, Kriya put a little ambulance here where you can get some help. We have zooming options, okay, a couple things for like markups if ever required type of thing. Making our way over to our send to AuthentiSign button or our transaction button for kind of setting up the e-signature, right? Assuming we finished everything, we filled out this page. If we were just doing this one form, well, we would just click on this pen. If you did link in your, geez, I'm forgetting the word for it, in your app store, if you linked an additional third-party option, well, it won't say send to AuthentiSign. It will say, I don't know, send to signing partner, something along those lines. And then when you clicked on it, it wouldn't just immediately go to AuthentiSign. It would show you your 2 or your 3 different options. Like I can click on it and then follow it up by clicking on DocuSign, or I can click on it and then click on AuthentiSign. So if you have more than one, this is where you would see it at the level that you're ready to set up this signature. You also have an add and remove page. In the case of an agreement of purchase and sale, it's referring to additional Schedule A pages. So if I want a second Schedule A page, I would click Add Page. If I want to remove one, right? You get the point. And then we have our save and exit, which we already went over. What I'm going to do at this time, though, my intention isn't to kind of fill out all these different fields. More so, we're just trying to look at some formatting and conclude with a couple final things here. So we're going to make our way to the clause section where we can have a look at what it feels like to add clauses to a form. It is going to be on the Schedule A page, which is page 6. So I'm going to use this navigate button to get there. There we go. So we're on the Schedule A. Looks like we have another street name field on our Schedule A. So it's coming from our details section. Okay, and we can see the box where all the clauses go. It's right here. When you click on it, it highlights in green, just like the other boxes. Okay. If you're elsewhere on the form in your selection and you go to click your clause button, you will notice a pop-up telling you you cannot do that. A little bit silly, but just to bear in mind this step, it says a multi-line text box needs to be selected before you can add a clause. Thank you, WEBForms. You do have to click in this box. I know it feels a little bit strange that you must. Clauses can only go in one place, but it wants us to select this box, click on the clause button, and then we're free to start entering clauses. When I let this load here, just give it a second. There we go. It finally popped up the actual options. Sorry, it looks like my internet might be running a little bit slow today. Sorry about that. We've got our personal, office, and system clauses, which look very, very similar to when we were checking them in the setup. Okay. So we can keyword search for the clauses. Maybe I want to find a deposit clause or whatever the case may be. I would start typing. I think I'm going to go to system clauses. However, I find it easier to use the folders in general. But if I just click on that and then go English, and maybe I want the deposit clause up at the top, whatever the case may be. With a clause, you do get to preview it before you add it in your basket. Okay, so if you wanted to see, oh, I wasn't sure, is it this first one, is it a further sum of, or is it a balance of purchase price that I wanted to use? When you click on it, it does pop up a preview, and then you can just read the next one. That's just when you click on the title. I think I do want just the general pay further sum of. So let's go with the first one, and it's in the basket, just like what we saw before. Maybe I'm not ready to add it just yet, and I'm going to click back to English instead. In this portion, again, these clauses aren't going to be kind of specific to the transaction. I just want to max out the amount of characters to see what the formatting looks like. So I know the environmental clauses are overly wordy. I'm going with those. And I selected 7 of them. Maybe I'll select 6 of them. That seems like a lot. So we have a pay further sum of, and then we have 6 environmental clauses. Maybe that's what I'm looking for at this time. I click OK, and I should get a pop-up. You've hit the max character limit on this field. Would you like to add additional pages? In our case, yes. Let that load. Let it load completely. Okay. When it's done loading, it'll actually put you on page 7, which is, or page 8, however many pages it gave you, to fit the information that you added. If I hover this, I'll see, okay, it looks like in our case with 6 environmental clauses and a deposit further sum of, it went from 6 pages to a 7-page document. Could scroll to the side and center it a little bit better. Okay. But we could see as well, right? Like the formatting isn't perfect. There might be some things that I want to go in here and work on. It came through maybe not in the most visually friendly kind of way either. It's just a block of information. So just be aware of some formatting things. Main formatting part that I want to address definitely is this scroll option. Okay, but some things to kind of work on here. So let me see. I think a clause got cut off at the bottom. It looked like it was even just the beginning at least, which is okay. So I might just take this portion, right? You can type anything in here. You can make your changes. I'm actually gonna start here. Or you know what? We'll come back to that. I'll just cut this out, and I'll come down here where there's space for it, and I might just paste it in. Okay, I can always just kind of start my formatting, rejoin the word that was cut off. So we have this agreement. Looks like the end of that specific clause comes down to here. I'll probably start fixing it up a little bit. When it comes to this portion, I did want to talk about the scroll option. So it looks like when I scroll right to the top, the last piece of clause I could fit is probably up to this one, and that's even to be determined. But you do want to address this scroll. And what's happening is, unfortunately, it looks like physically on the page, not all of the clauses fitting. So I'm actually going to take a certain section and bring it on my next page to get rid of this scroll. What's happening though is physically it can't fit, right? So if I sent this to a printer and I printed it out right now, well, it's going to try and make all this information fit. And as a result, maybe I'm on a size, I don't know, what am I on? A size 9 font? Well, to make it fit to the printer, it might just automatically shrink it to a size 8 font. It's going to kind of compress a little bit. All the information is going to fit, but when it goes to a piece of paper, maybe this part doesn't fit. And you'll know that from the scroll option. So I'm actually going to cut this one out as well. I might even have to do a different portion we're going to see in a moment. Maybe I'll just go like this, paste that in. Okay, those look a little bit better. And let's just work with those few lines that we have down here. Let's see if we can fit everything. My intention here, though, is to make a space between each of these. That looks like the break of a clause. That's the end of a clause there. And that's the end of a clause there. Okay, so let's have a look down. It's already starting to look a whole lot better. So we managed to fit it, and there is no scroll, which is really good. So now I know in my mind, like if I send this to a printer or I send it to AuthentiSign or whatever the case may be, well, it all fits in the section. It's not going to have any issues getting compressed or anything like that. I do really want to address it though, because it really kind of, it does frustrate me. This section is, I find it very strange, right? Like I guess I'm just so used to using like a Word document where if I start hitting enter, I'm just expecting that the bottom line comes from here and it just continues through to the other page. It does not do that. So just acknowledge that, realize the way that this is set up and the fact that that does not occur. It just kind of creates this scroll. So be aware of it and kind of get rid of those spaces. As soon as the scroll goes away, right? It goes away as soon as the text fits. Then you know you're good to go. I mean, the important part to bear in mind, however, okay, is I'm typically, I should only be doing this at the time that I'm creating my transaction template, right? I'm creating a cookie cutter for all of my transactions. I shouldn't have to format my clauses every single time. So do bear that in mind, right? I'm going to create a template for specifically my residential leases, for my residential offers, for my whatever the case may be, right? So maybe I only have to tackle these standardized clauses in my schedule pages once for every template that I create. Okay, but in general, right, there might be some quick things I gotta switch. Once you're done with all that, however, what I would like to show you in kind of as a few final words here before we conclude is how to send more than one document at a time. Sorry, how to send more than one form at a time to your signing option, right? I know right now if I clicked on this pen, it would only send my agreement of purchase and sale. So I know a question that comes up pretty often is, hey, how do you send all of your forms at once? I'm going to save and exit, and I'll show you that really quick here. I do see that we did go, we just hit kind of our 3 p.m. timer here, so we are going to go over. I'll have all of this concluded within the next 5 minutes, let's say, and then we could do the bit of a question and answer for any individuals that have something on their mind or would like to discuss some extra topics. Apologies there, I did kind of go really thoroughly into some of the steps. But yeah, if you got the 5 minutes, let's go through that short piece here. If you are sending all 3 of these forms all at once to AuthentiSign, however, notice that it is going to happen in your basket, right? Once I'm done filling out my 100, when I'm done filling out my FinTrack, and if I want to send them to AuthentiSign all at once, I can do that, but I have to select them here from the Forms section. When I click on the basket, I can print all 3. I can also send all 3 to AuthentiSign. And when I click on this, we'll be right back to where we started the session. It'll put us in AuthentiSign where we have steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. Kind of comes full circle, and you would see how, like, you know, go through the adding your participants. These are the 3 kind of forms that are going to be a part of it, and you're going to finish off by designing each of these 3. Okay. So as far as steps in general, everything we covered there. As I mentioned, the last 2 minutes here is just some things that I wanted to say from the setup. So I'm going to click on setup. I'm going to go into the program settings. Now that we had a quicker look at forms and we had a quick look at transactions, right, there's a whole bunch of options here with regards to your account. But as I said, there might be some really small tweaks in here that make things so much more efficient for you. So when you open up these drop downs, they give you those specific menu options. This is transaction settings. And I can see that there's even a check mark for something like use wizard. If I uncheck this and I update, the next time I create a transaction, that automatic checkbox that's on wizard when you click create, well, that's going to stop bothering me. If I'm the type that doesn't like to use the wizard and have it checked off, right, I might just uncheck it here so that it's not checked off on my next 100 transactions. Okay. Same thing goes for your form settings. You saw my dislike for the Courier bold. Maybe if I am more of a Times New Roman bold individual and I need a size 10 font, well, you have to make the switch at your program settings level and hit update. That way, over the next 10 years, I don't have to change the font every single time I approach a form, right? I would change it here, and then my forms, this would be my new default for my fonts. Okay, so have a look through your program settings. There might be some small things that are just personal for you that you would make a switch to that are going to save you immense amounts of time. Even if it's just like a small thing that you switch every single time, you might be able to save some time by just doing it once here, and then every single form you do moving forward can be that new default. Okay, just make the switch and click update. I didn't click update on mine, but when you want to make the switch, just hop in here and have a look.